What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before I get going, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. So much to get into today. Another World Cup focused show. This first segment, all about U.S. women's national team, debriefing the group stage, a little bit of looking ahead. There are lineup graphics coming up later in this segment. I really dove deep into this and wanted to spend a large portion of this show just talking about what has happened so far and what it means moving forward. Obviously, the first thing to acknowledge here is that this team was inches away from getting eliminated in the group stage. I'm not going to spend the time to talk about what that would mean and the historical impact of getting eliminated in the group stage and all of that stuff. I have some general state of the program thoughts I'm going to save for whenever the US's run comes to an end in this tournament. But there is absolutely no reason it should have been that stressful. That was right up there with the worst performances in the history of the U.S. women's national team against Portugal. But ultimately, they survived. These World Cups are at a point where that does have to mean something. You're seeing it across the board with some of the teams that made the knockout round, some of the teams that have exited. This World Cup has been even more competitive than I thought it would be. You do have to celebrate the fact that you were able to advance and that you are still alive, because it is not a guarantee at this point for any team. Ask Canada, ask Brazil. So I did want to get that out of the way first. Obviously, it's not good enough. And so I'm going to start with the big picture and then kind of get more specific. And where I want to begin this conversation is just this idea that these three games, how the group stage went, would be framed differently and should be interpreted differently if the struggles that we are seeing were something new. There's this talk about, World Cups in the past sometimes, and I believe it was 2011. I might have that one wrong, 11 or 15, but I think it was 11. No, it might have been 15 even, where, group stage didn't go great. It's not like the group stage has always been perfect for this U.S. team. However, in the 2011 World Cup and in the 2015 World Cup and the 2019 World Cup, I'll throw that in there too, did the U.S. go into that tournament looking this shaky, with this many question marks, and this many losses to other really good teams as the rest of the world gets better and better? That's the difference here. And I feel like that is getting glossed over, and it needs to be emphasized. That is the most frustrating part of all of this for me, is that the issues you are seeing in these three games, generally speaking, have been there since the Olympics, and maybe even before, because obviously the Olympics didn't go particularly well either. And it doesn't look any different. There don't appear to be any solutions. Sometimes you have a bad stretch of games or you have a bad game, and you can turn it around within the same tournament. You have all these players just play this long stretch of NWSL games without playing many national team games. It could take a little bit for it to all gel. That's fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's England not having a particularly great first game and looking better and better as the tournament goes on. Or Germany having that loss and then to Colombia and regrouping from there and looking really good the rest of the tournament. This is a continuation of a trend that has been happening for months and months and months. And it hasn't gotten any better since this team has been able to spend multiple weeks together specifically trying to address these problems. To me, that is the headline, the most frustrating part, the biggest point of criticism for Vlatko Andonovski, for this coaching staff, for these players, is that nothing has gotten better. Which leads me to the Carly Lloyd part of this. And I'm assuming probably everybody who's watching this video has seen it by now, but Carly Lloyd really went into this team basically paraphrasing, but basically suggested there's just not enough effort, not a high enough care level, not enough intensity. Was criticizing them for the, celebrating and dancing on the field, interacting with fans after the Portugal game, which I didn't love the optics of that either. To me, there's just a standard that needs to be upheld, and you didn't uphold it. There's very little to celebrate. Yes, you should be happy you got through. But I was not thrilled seeing those reactions on the field either. I wasn't thrilled that Lindsey Horan was laughing when Megan Rapinoe missed against Vietnam. The thought that went through my head was, that's only funny if you're not worried about it continuing to happen. And guess what? Now, it's more of a chance creation issue than a finishing issue, but the finishing hasn't been good the next 2 games either. If you were confident that that would get fixed, that's one thing. But there's nothing to suggest this is going to get fixed. So I was a little bit irked by that too. There is a difference, though, between not loving that and going where Carly Lloyd went and basically just saying this team doesn't care enough. I refuse to do that. Generally speaking, I refuse to do that with any athlete. And specifically this group. They have put so much into their careers, have sacrificed so much to get to this point. And they understand what it means to be on this team. Listen to any of them talk. And they understand the weight and the expectations that come with putting on that jersey as the premier women's national team in the world. They all get that. Now, are they all handling it perfectly at this moment? No, probably not. But to me, that's a bridge too far. And Carly Lloyd even seemed to backtrack and kind of say emotions got the best of her, and she took it a step farther than she should have, which I was glad to see. Because it's one thing, you can bring that up and it can be part of the conversation. But to make that the big criticism, to me, is completely unfair. What is fair is to say, where is the improvement? What is being done to try and fix this? And before I get into that part, the other thing I want to bring up here is that I understand for this team, rebuilding World Cups, transition tournaments don't exist. Because it doesn't matter what team you bring to a tournament, you're expected to win. That's the standard this team has earned for itself. To me, that is one of the highest levels of respect you can give a team, is that you are just expected to win every single time because that's how great you are. And this team has absolutely earned that. So you don't get to kind of compare tournament to tournament, cycle to cycle in terms of what the actual roster looks like and what the squad looks like. It is, and this is not in any way an excuse or even a reason for what's happening. They should be way better than they've looked so far. But it is worth pointing out here in this conversation that this is a World Cup on the kind of in between 2 peaks when you look at this team. 19, you had a bunch of players in their prime. Megan Rapinoe was still there, one of the best players in the tournament. Alex Morgan, that midfield. You can go down the list. That was an all-time great team. Now you are transitioning out of that era and into the next one. So you have your center back, who's looked like probably maybe outside of Rose Lavelle, one of your 2 best players, who has played a year and a half of professional soccer. You started a midfielder who had not made an appearance for the U.S. national team until the warm-up game for this tournament, the send-off game. Now, I know Savannah DeMel wasn't supposed to be starting, but that was the reality in that first game. These kind of things don't happen with the U.S. Women's National Team. Your best player has never played in a major tournament. That's another one. And you're starting, as I pointed out in the preview, 2 strikers, 2 attackers under the age of, I think Sophia Smith is 23. I don't remember off the top of my head. Whether it's Alyssa Thompson or Trinity Rodman on the other side. And I know Lynn Williams started the last game, but you get the point. This is a very, very young Emily Fox at your outside back position. This is an incredibly young team that is going to be awfully good in 2027. When Naomi Girma is in her prime and Sophia Smith is in her prime with 4 more years of professional experience. And Alyssa Thompson is in 18, Alyssa Thompson is 22. And you then add the next group coming in. This is not supposed to be the peak. This is the valley. And I know it doesn't count for this team because they should still be right there with any team in this tournament. But I want to throw it out there as part of this conversation in terms of trying to figure out why this is happening. Because that is part of it. This team is not head and shoulders above everybody else. Both because of the injuries, because of the actual roster, and just the way that this is working from a squad standpoint, and who's making this team and what experience do they have. Kind of, right, it's just a transition between eras. And because everybody else is getting much, much better, and now you have the best teams in the world on their level. It's all coming together, and what you've got, in addition to the poor performances, is a very limited margin of error that nearly sent the U.S. home on the group stage. Okay. Now, let's talk about potential solutions and lineups for this game against Sweden. I'm going to actually break down the round of 16 matchups in the next segment. So I'm not going to get too deep into the matchup itself. But I want to go through some potential options to try and fix this. Because we're at the point where you cannot continue to do the same thing. Because it is clear it is not working and it is not good enough to beat Sweden. So something needs to change. I have multiple proposals as to what that could be. So here we go. The first one. And this is specifically for the Sweden game, so Rose Lavelle is not in any of these lineups that I've made here. The first one is to go to a 4-4-2. And this is the lineup I would field. And I'll talk through some of the reasons why, and I've got different iterations of this 4-4-2. But the thinking here, and I'm certainly not the only one I've seen suggest this, is you move Crystal Dunn into a more natural position. You move her into midfield, and you get the extra body in midfield. Because too often this team has gotten overrun. It happened against the Netherlands, and it happened times against Portugal. So instead of going with a 3, you go with the 4, which then means you have to shuffle your back line. So I would move Emily Fox to the right and play Emily Sonnet or Kelly O'Hara, whoever you want, at right back. These are just the players I would pick. I have reasons for them, but obviously the idea is more tactical than it is the specific personnel. Especially, in some situations it's personnel specific, and I'll get into those. But generally speaking, it's about the tactics and the formation in the system. So now you have Crystal Dunn playing the position she plays every day for Portland. You have an extra body in midfield. You don't have Rose Lavelle, so you get Lindsay Horan playing in the 10. Just give her the freedom to get forward, minimal defensive responsibilities, give her space to operate, let her do her thing. I would start Lynn Williams on the right because I want somebody I know that is going to track back and to cover ground and to put the work in. And I have more confidence in her than I do Trinity Rodman in that aspect. And Trinity Rodman has gotten 2 opportunities and it hasn't looked all that great. So it's not like she's really cemented herself as a starter. You can pick either of them. You can pick Alyssa Thompson. I'm just going with Lynn Williams because I know she's going to give me something that I find important. And also, what this does is it gives you some flexibility that you can kind of turn it into a 4-3-3 in attack if you want. You know, move Lindsey Horan to the right of the three, move Julia Ertz a little bit higher, and then you've got your front three that started last game. So you can push Lynn Williams forward and you can trust her to do the defensive work. That's why I have her on the right. And then I've been saying this from the very beginning, but Julia Ertz is playing holding midfielder. There's an argument. It's her or Rose Lavelle, the most important player on this team. And it's because one of the issues, as I talked about, that has not gotten addressed is the fact that nobody has played that position the way Julia Ertz can. I don't know what else Vlatko Andonovski has to see to make this change. At this point, I'm just assuming it's not going to happen. But if I'm in charge, Julia Ertz is 100% playing holding midfielder. Naomi Girma, and I talked about this in the first game, if you wanted to say, I wanted to put somebody experienced next to Naomi Girma for her first World Cup game, that's fine. Naomi Girma does not need anybody holding her hand. She does not need any help. She has been one of, if not the best player on this team in the tournament. She is sensational and incredibly mature, incredibly intelligent. I can't say enough good things about her. She doesn't need Julia Ertz next to her. So I'm putting in Alana Cook. I would have done this from the start. I don't have too much else to say about that. This is what I would do. And I just naturally, it makes more sense as a diamond because Lindsey Horan's going to get forward and Julia Ertz isn't. So that's my thought process for making it a diamond. I like the tactical flexibility as I talked about where you can kind of shift from a 4-4-2 to a 4-3-3, keep that idea, but give you something different in midfield with Crystal Dunn and 4 players that are actually going to help you defend in the midfield. The second iteration is very similar, but this is, okay, Vlatko Andonovski wants to keep Julia Ertz as the center back. So you put Andy Sullivan in, Christy Mewis, whoever. Now, what this could turn into, and I'll talk about this more with the next setup, is this could be something that works better with Rose Lavelle. But obviously you don't have her for the next game. That was an incredibly unfortunate yellow. The first time I saw it, I wondered what in the world Rose Lavelle was doing, and then I saw the replay, and she clearly got shoved. I don't think there was anything she could have done about that. It is what it is. You got to move forward, but that was incredibly just unlucky. So you keep Andy Sullivan in her position. Same idea. Move Crystal Dunn to midfield. I just kept Lynn Williams again. You can interchange the players if you want. But the big thing here, and this is where I'll talk about kind of the other part of the 4-4-2. The benefit outside of getting the extra body in midfield is that you give Sophia Smith room to operate. I talked about this when the roster was announced. For all of this conversation about there's no backup forward for Alex Morgan, no center forward, no number 9. I never bought into that because there are 3 players in this starting lineup right next to me that play as some kind of central forward for their club team. Most of the attackers can play through the middle. Alex Morgan is not the only one capable of doing it. And by the way, Sophia Smith is a better forward than she is a winger. She's a world-class player at both because she's the most complete forward I have ever seen. Because she can do everything that you want a winger to do, and she can do everything generally that you want a center forward to do. 1v1, creativity, finishing, hold-up play, connecting passes. She's got all of it. It's what makes her so special. But when she's playing as a wide player and doesn't have a lot of space to operate, and you're not getting a lot of balls over the top for her to go chase down, it's just easier to kind of isolate her and double team her and take her out of the game. Because it's not like she's having trouble beating people 1v1. There are just too many bodies there because everybody knows how dangerous she is. So you go to a 2-forward setup and it's more natural for her, and it gives her more space, more lanes to run into. And I'm keeping Alex Morgan in this starting lineup because although it hasn't been great at times, some of the best stuff you've seen from the U.S. came off of Alex Morgan's hold-up play and her knockdowns and her ability to hold and distribute the ball. So to me, she's still got a starting spot. That's option number 2. Option number 3 is to forego the holding midfielder altogether. And this is the one that if Rose Lavelle was healthy, I would consider. I would make it more of a 4-2-3-1 and still have Lindsey Horan and Julie Ertz playing a double pivot. Kind of like the U.S. men do with Yunus Musa sometimes. Drop Horan deeper. And also then when you're in attack, let her go because you know Julie Ertz can handle it. But obviously Rose Lavelle not here for this game. So pick your other midfielder. To me, I would go with Savannah DeMello. She's not a starter when this team is at full strength, but she got a raw end of the deal in that getting pulled at halftime of the Netherlands game. It was because she was the only player that was going to come out. It was just the sub that had to be made for Rose Lavelle. But she was the one who was actually making things happen in that first half, drawing fouls, winning the ball back. If somebody's got to play in that spot, to me, she's earned another opportunity. And then it's the same ideas. This is, again, assuming Julie Ertz is playing center back. So you've got and obviously Crystal Dunn now in midfield, so switching it back, Emily Fox on the left, Emily Sonnett on the right, to get that extra body in midfield. I've talked about most of the other thought process with this. And then the final one, if you want to keep it as a 4-3-3. And once again, this is just assuming that Julie Ertz is not playing central midfield. Here is the other thing you can do to shake things up. You keep your back 4. You keep Andy Sullivan. You put Savannah DeMello or whoever else in there for Rose Lavelle. And then you give Sophia Smith the number 9 position. And you say, we're not going to try and play with Alex Morgan dropping deeper to then play the ball ahead to our wingers. We're going to go for the pace and the 1v1 ability. And we're going to let Sophia Smith do what she does best and get her in her most comfortable position. I would change the formation. But if you are determined to play in a 4-3-3, this at least is something different. And I also feel like Alex Morgan has done enough to earn a starting spot. But if you want to do this differently, and again, you can replace Lynn Williams with Alyssa Thompson if you want to replace Trinity Rodman with Alyssa Thompson. The point is to get 3 players with incredible pace and 1v1 ability out there. And see if that gives you what the system and the philosophy they have been playing with hasn't so far. So those are the 4 different lineups you could field against Sweden that give you something different than what you've seen so far. And I did this in part to highlight where I started, which is where I will end this conversation. This has gone on for too long without something being done to change the situation. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But the one thing you cannot do is continue to do something that is not achieving the results you want. That, to me, is inexcusable. That is where I have a really hard time buying into what you're doing. You have to be able to recognize when it is not working and try to change the status quo. And Generally, the group stage is not somewhere you have to do that. But it's been that bad, and the other teams are that good now. And so you have this Portuguese team that very nearly knocked the U.S. out, and now your punishment for not being good in the group stage is that you're facing Sweden in the round of 16. I'm going to make predictions for these games as I preview them, so I'm not going to say anything here. But to me, those are your options because something has to be done. The way this has gone over the past 2 years, the way it's gone in the group stage, there is no justification to roll out another 4-3-3 with Andy Sullivan at holding midfielder and Alex Morgan at striker. To me, that is not an option. If you do that, you have to win the game. Plain and simple. It's one of those kind of win-lose or lose-lose situations. I guess to a certain extent that kind of didn't come out the way I intended it to. But you get what I'm saying here. That you're not going to get any credit for making the change. And if it doesn't work, you're going to get hammered. Or you're not going to get any credit for winning the game by doing the same thing that hasn't worked. So you're not going to win either way. You can win on the scoreboard, but you're not, from a PR, publicity, fan perspective, you're not going to win anything by doing the same thing that hasn't worked and it works this time. So to me, there is no upside in that. You got to try something different. And if it's a train wreck in the first half, then go back at halftime. But I just find it hard to believe it can be worse than what we've seen so far. So, there is the U.S. Women's National Team breakdown. Going to take my first break. When I come back, round of 16 preview, talking a little bit about all of the matchups, things I find most interesting, and predicting the winners. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. This segment dedicated to looking ahead to that round of 16 in the World Cup. As I'm talking Wednesday night Eastern Time, we know most of the teams who will be participating. So I'm talking about obviously the matchups that have already been set, and I'm operating under the assumption that nothing dramatic is going to happen in these final games on Thursday morning Eastern Time to wrap up the group stage. I will talk about that when I get to those games. So I'm just laying out a round of 16 as I expect it to happen. A couple matchups that are already set to start us off here. One side of the bracket, on one corner of the bracket, if you will, you've got Switzerland, Spain, Netherlands, South Africa. I talked last week about this idea that this World Cup, the next step was to prove that these teams, the expanded field, the teams that are coming in for the first time, second time, can be competitive. That it's not going to be a bunch of 13-0s. Obviously that happened. The next step after that was, can some of these teams that are giving the traditional powers trouble actually put together multiple results and get to the round of 16. And that's happened too. New Zealand came so close, and we've got a couple examples here we're going to talk about of really incredible stories getting to the round of 16. One of them, South Africa. What this team has been through, I was reading a little while ago about how much the bonus money means to these players. The fact that they're actually getting compensated for playing soccer. It's an incredible story. And the way that they just kept scoring goals when they needed to find a way to win that last game and get second place in that group, absolutely incredible. So congratulations, South Africa. And it's one of those examples of this. This is what a World Cup is supposed to be. That nothing is guaranteed to anybody. And that's what you're seeing here in 2023. These matchups in particular, you got clear favorites in both of them. Spain, I know they got trounced by Japan. They should be fine. And the Netherlands have looked good to really good pretty much all tournament. Maybe not the most spectacular first 180 minutes, but had a great first half against the U.S., had a good game against Vietnam, looking just fine. So I'm picking Spain and the Netherlands. The other part of this, not only are they just better teams on paper, but if you look at the way that Switzerland and South Africa got here, they don't have this signature win where you look at it and you go, oh, they don't have the Colombia win over Germany where they can play with the best teams in the world. They did what they needed to in groups where you had some vulnerable teams. They pulled upsets, definitely. But there are levels to that, right? They didn't go beat a top 10 team in the world that everybody expects to be making the quarterfinals. They beat some teams you expect to get to the knockout stage. And so now you're up against a whole different level of opposition. And I just think it's going to be a little bit too much for both of them. Spain, though, have an interesting challenge here as a free-flowing team that scores a lot of goals against the Swiss team that just hasn't given up goals at this tournament. Hasn't been great offensively at times, but when you got a really good foundation when you just don't give up goals, especially in a group stage where you had some teams in your group that didn't perform particularly well, you find a way to get one win across, you get a couple of clean sheets, and all of a sudden you're winning the group. That's the kind of consistency that gets you to the round of 16. To me, it just doesn't get you any farther than that. Then, the other side of that bracket is Japan and Norway, Sweden, United States. The way that this played out provided some really good round of 16 matchups that we weren't necessarily supposed to get. And I want to start this conversation by pointing out how incredibly unlucky Japan and Sweden got. For me, they've been the best two teams at the tournament, and certainly two of the best 3 or 4, based on what we've seen so far. And what is their reward? Japan has to play a Norway team with Caroline Graham Hansen and potentially Ada Hegerberg, and Sweden has to play the United States because those two teams didn't do their job. And so now the teams that get punished are the ones that ran through their groups and looked spectacular. It's just the cruel reality of this tournament and the way that this bracket was set up with these strange pairings for the round of 16 and the weird results that happened here. There just isn't a quote-unquote easier path because it didn't line up the way that it was supposed to. And so Japan, Norway, I've been saying this, that I've given up on Norway. I really want to believe in them. They're that team that I will always convince myself they have a chance. I'll never be surprised if Norway beat anybody. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game. And obviously, Ada Hegerberg's health is going to be a big question heading in. This Japanese team is just playing too well for me, though. They've been spectacular. And the talent gap is not all that large between the two. Norway's got the better top end players, but Japan is probably better across the board, more depth, those kind of things. So it's essentially a toss up to start with. One team is feeling great, the other team is not feeling good at all. Give me the team feeling great, I'll take Japan. And then we get to Sweden, USA. The fascinating part of this is that whoever wins this game should be looked at as the favorite to get out of this side of the bracket. Of course, these were the two teams when you looked at it from a U.S. perspective heading in. Sweden was the most scary team on the road to the final. And if Sweden win this game, after what they've already done, if they dispatch the United States, then clearly they're the team to beat on this side. If the U.S. win, my thought process is they've done enough and fixed enough that if they can beat Sweden, they should beat everybody else too. It will be such a dramatic turnaround from what we've seen so far that all of a sudden you got to start treating the U.S. like one of the favorites to win the tournament again. So it just creates a fascinating dynamic in this game. I'm picking Sweden. The gap is not that large to begin with. And I just haven't seen any reason to believe that a U.S. team without Rose Lavelle is going to look miles better than what we've seen through 3 games. Maybe that was the wake-up call they needed. But I would argue the first half against the Dutch was the wake-up call they needed. And they've responded for a half, and then they laid another dud. There's a real argument Sweden is the better team at this moment in time. Clearly the more informed team. And they're just not intimidated by this U.S. side at all. So I'm picking Sweden. Different scenario, I would be picking the U.S. And you got to look at if you win that group, you're facing South Africa with Spain hypothetically up next, as opposed to having to go through the 2 most impressive teams in the tournament so far to even get to the semifinals. But that's the reality of the situation. Japan and Sweden also have to go through each other to get to that semifinal game. It makes for a fascinating bit of television and incredible drama. So that is one side of the bracket. Moving over to the other side. Australia, Denmark, France, Germany. And I set these matchups up assuming that Germany finishes behind Colombia. Colombia already on 6 points. That's as many as Germany can get. So if Colombia gets a point, they're top of the group. I'm just going to assume that happens, which sets up these matchups and moves Colombia to the other game that I'll talk about in a minute. Australia, of course, the big question is Sam Kerr. That being said, they just played a must-win game without Sam Kerr and were brilliant against a very good battle-tested Canada team. You saw all kinds of attacking depth, all kinds of players chipping in, making things happen. That is really, really positive if you're a supporter of the Matildas. And it did an awful lot to erase some of the bad vibes and the stress. Now you're through. It's a completely new game. You just got to beat Denmark, and then you go again. And if you don't have Sam Kerr for this game, maybe you have her for the next one. I'm assuming they're going to do what they did last time and just play it to the very end so that nobody knows whether she can actually go or not, or whether she's going to take the field. I'm still taking Australia in this game after what I saw against Canada. The few times I've watched Denmark over the past couple years, it just looks so difficult in attack. And I know Pernilla Harder has a few actual raw production numbers in this game, in this tournament. She's got a goal. In the last game, she's got an assist. But from a chance creation, goals from open play standpoint, they're going to need more for her, or somebody is going to have to step up because they're just not getting enough. They've really had to work for the goals that they've scored. Australia could have had 5 or 6 against Canada with how good they were in attack. To me, it's just going to be too much for Denmark to deal with. I just feel like Denmark is one of those teams that has a high floor and a low ceiling. You trust them to do what they're supposed to do to get to the round of 16, but then once they face the better opposition, I don't see them being able to pull this off. With a rejuvenated Australia at home, people are feeling good, believing again after that Canada game. To me, it's going to be too much, and Australia goes through. Then France, Germany. This is right up there with Sweden, United States in terms of games of the round of 16. France got to rest some players for that last group stage game, gave up some goals, scored a bunch of goals. Don't really know what to take away from that. And France in general just had a confusing group stage because you have the draw with Jamaica that sends alarm bells. Then you go back and you beat Brazil. Looked great at times, not so great at others. I'd argue it was a pretty even game. You found a way to get your set piece goal for Rennie Renard and get the 3 points. Then you score a bunch of goals and also concede goals to a team that you really shouldn't be conceding 3 goals to. So what do you make of it all? And then in all of this, that Jamaica draw starts looking better and better because Brazil couldn't score on them either. So I don't really know how to feel about this France team heading into the knockout stage. I'm pretty much where I was at the beginning. I haven't seen anything horrible or impressive enough to change my mind. To me, they're a round of 16 to quarterfinal team depending on the matchups. I picked Germany to win this tournament. Still waiting to see that third game, so don't have as much data. But I'm just not overly worried about the loss to Colombia. Maybe that's a wake-up call that this team responds to and raises their game up to another level. I'm picking Germany to win this one. To me, they're just the better team. They're the healthier team. There do seem to be much more positive vibes coming out of France. So I did have to think about this longer than I would have, a month ago or even start of this tournament. But I'm not betting against Germany. I'm just not going to do it. And if I am, it's not going to be France. It's going to be a team that is in the very upper echelon. And France, to me, is just a tier below that. So I've got Germany going through. And then our last two, England, Nigeria, Colombia, Jamaica. These are the other two teams that deserve an immense round of applause and congratulations. Nigeria, dealing with so much from a federation standpoint, lack of support, frustration, and they get out of that group of death. The really difficult group with no bad teams, and they find a way. It's a terrific story. This is a good team that got some attention early for the Canada game, getting that draw, and continued to build from there. Then you've got Colombia, Jamaica. Again, I'm assuming Colombia is going to win that group by doing what they need to in that final game that has not been played as I record this. And here's Jamaica. Got destroyed at the last World Cup. Program has been shut down due to funding recently. So they had to kind of re-energize and rebuild it heading into that 2019 World Cup. You've got this very strange collection of some high level players. You know, Bunny Shaw obviously starring in the WSL. You've got some other players with English backgrounds, just like the men's team. You've got your Shayna Matthews. Then you have, the teenagers and the players in college and the players without clubs. It's just a incredible collection that has come together again with all of the federation frustrations and not feeling like they're getting the support they need. And yet here they are. They go through the group stage and don't give up a goal. Did it look pretty? No. Especially against Brazil. France, maybe it looked a little bit better. Brazil, it was very much just defend for 90 minutes because you came in knowing you're the team that has that advantage. You only need the draw. The initiative is on Brazil. And to their credit, they just defended exceptionally well for 90 minutes. And, it's not like Brazil missed 14 clear-cut chances. They kept trying, and there was always somebody from Jamaica stepping up. Whether that was, defenders, midfielders, goalkeeper. Everybody just did their part, defended as a team, and got the draw that they needed. Which makes this matchup against Colombia fascinating. Because I kind of expected that Linda Caicedo was going to match up against a traditional power here. And instead, we got the exact opposite. We got Linda Caicedo against the team that nobody expected to be here. But this team that nobody expected to be here has been spectacular defensively. So something's got to give, which is going to make this a really cool matchup. And, of course, one of these teams has headed to the quarterfinals, which is an incredible story in and of itself. And Jamaica have essentially been playing, knockout-style games from a tactical, philosophical standpoint from the beginning of this tournament. So they are very much used to the way that they're going to have to play to continue advancing. It's what they've been doing from the beginning. Defend, look for counters, absorb pressure, all that stuff. Nothing changes for them because it's now the knockout stage. And then, of course, your other team in here is England. Don't have too much to say about England other than they're looking like the team they're supposed to. It will be interesting to see how Serena Wiegman decides to handle the number 6 position if Kira Walsh is not able to participate in this game and what that ends up looking like. That is something to monitor here. Ultimately, though, if you're England, you are chomping at the bit to have these 3 teams standing in the way of you getting to the semis. You're going to have to face somebody from the other side of the bracket, whether that's France, whether that's Germany, whether that's Australia. But you have 3 teams that are significantly worse than you from a talent perspective. Everybody else has somebody that scares you before the semifinals. You've got Spain and the Netherlands who are going to have to meet. Some combination of Japan, Sweden, USA. You could even throw Norway in there if you want to. France and Germany are going to meet, and then one of them is going to play Australia or Denmark. England has 2 games that are essentially continuations of the group stage. Now, Colombia showed they've got no problem taking down teams of England's caliber. They already beat Germany. So that's not to say that this is a guarantee. Don't exist in this tournament anymore. But when you have 2 games that line up this way, that you can avoid facing somebody who is on your level from a talent standpoint until the semifinals, when this could have been Canada or Australia instead of Nigeria, and then Germany, you got to be counting your lucky stars if you're England. And you got to take advantage of the opportunity. And then the question becomes, what happens in that semifinal game when somebody else has kind of had to go through a gauntlet to get there, and England might not have to get out of second or third gear? Now, they're going to be difficult games. I'm not saying England's going to win them both 5-0, but there is something about facing the highest level opposition that England is not going to have to do to the same degree as other teams to get deep into this tournament. So it creates a fascinating storyline in that sense as well. I'm taking England, and I'm going to take Colombia. I would not be surprised at all if Jamaica wins that game, in all honesty. But, Bunny Shaw looks like she's carrying some kind of knock. I'm sure they're emotionally drained, physically exhausted from all of the work they put in. Colombia just have to be feeling good. They're going to have the best player on the field, potentially. I guess you could argue Bunny Shaw. But Linda Caicedo's just been spectacular. And then you get a Linda Caicedo and Lauren James matchup in the quarterfinals. Yes, please. So this is setting up very nicely. That is the World Cup round of 16 preview. I will take my second break here. And when I come back, as always, the weekend look ahead, taking a look at the best games going on around the world this weekend. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show one more time. It is time for the weekend look ahead. Not too much to cover here. I'm just picking out a couple games from your major competitions going on to highlight the ones I'm most interested in. Just ran through the entire World Cup lineup, but I will start there. One game Saturday, one game Sunday. Japan-Norway is the one I am looking at on Saturday. Can Japan keep this going? Can Norway figure things out? This should be a really, really good competitive game. That is 4 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. And then, of course, Sunday, 5 a.m. Eastern, Sweden and the United States. Your game of the round of 16. Looking forward to that one as well. I will be doing a match report for it, so be on the lookout for that. Recap video, all of that good stuff. Leagues Cup. Round of 32 is set. Still so many teams involved that I'm not going to dive too deep into it, and it's also kind of strange because there are games happening tonight and then Thursday, and it just kind of continues through. So, for your weekend planning purposes, games I want to highlight on Friday. Nashville at Cincinnati. Two of your best teams in MLS. Cincinnati at home is always a terrific atmosphere. Cincinnati both these clubs, trying to get that trophy, continue kind of momentum, winning, setting yourself up for a postseason run in MLS as well. Then, also, these are all Friday. Club America at Chicago Fire. Club America, obviously, storied tradition, Mexican power. Can the Chicago Fire pull this off? Can they find something to kind of kickstart their season, kickstart a run up the Eastern Conference, find a way to make a deep run in this tournament? Or are they going to lose to a team that is just better than they are? Then, Monterrey at Portland. Just kind of interested in this one. Pretty even matchup. Curious to see what this looks like. Of course, your MLS teams have an advantage being at home. So we're going to really start to test these Liga MX teams who did a very good job in the group stage. Most of the teams that went home, MLS teams, Liga MX had a very, very strong showing. Does that continue in the group stage now that you're at even more of a disadvantage? And then Tigres at Vancouver Whitecaps. Massive opportunity for Vancouver to make a statement, get this win. This is a team that, because it's, West Coast, Canada, not LA in terms of the profile, small market team, it just has a lot stacked against it from a publicity attention standpoint. This is your opportunity, Vancouver Whitecaps. You've got arguably the biggest club on the continent coming to your stadium in an elimination game in a tournament that is the only thing happening in North American soccer right now for, these two leagues. Terrific opportunity. We'll see if they can take advantage there. And if that wasn't enough, the English Championship also starts this weekend. Couple games I'm looking for there. Southampton at Sheffield Wednesday on Friday. What does this look like for Southampton? Can they get off to a strong start? Can Sheffield Wednesday kind of continue and build on last season? Then Saturday, West Brom at Blackburn Rovers. Two teams coming off of pretty good seasons, hoping to make at least the promotion playoff. So that's a good matchup to start the season. Then Sunday, two other really good ones. Coventry City at Leicester City. Obviously, team that came so close to making it to the Premier League. Team that got relegated from the Premier League and had a squad that was much better than where they finished. What does this new look Leicester look like? How do they line up? All of that kind of stuff. What does this journey look like for them? And then Cardiff City at Leeds United on Sunday as well. Leeds, same idea. Jettison some players, regrouping. Can you get yourself off to a strong start? Put yourself in position to get promoted right away? Or is this going to be a longer disappointing season for the likes of Leicester, Southampton, and Leeds coming from the Premier League to the Championship? So there is English soccer if you would like to watch it starting this weekend as we get ready for the Premier League season. That is all for the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As I already mentioned once, complete coverage of Sweden and the US will be coming on Sunday morning. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. As always, miss any of my content.